Hey guys, and welcome to another video. It is Karen, and today I'm back with a review of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the second trilogy that Brandon Sanderson has ever written, so it's one of his earlier works, and it is a fantasy series which is kind of on the verge between young adult and adult fantasy. To me, I really couldn't say. It felt more leaning towards adult, even though the main character is like 16 years of age, but she doesn't seem like this confused little teenager, so she is a little bit more mature than that, and because of that, for me, it really felt more like an adult fantasy. Before I get into this review, I just quickly want to say I haven't filmed a review in a while, and I've been thinking a little bit about how I want to do this, and I have come up with a 5-point system just to organize my thoughts, because usually it turns out rather messy, which is why I thought it might be good to have some kind of system in place. So the 5 points I will talk about for every book that I review are plot, which includes like the structure of the plot and the pacing, as well as the actual contents of the plot. The second, and for me personally, usually the most important thing, is characters, like how I like them, about their development, and just anything character-wise. Third piece, I'm not really sure how to call it. For a fantasy, it's certainly going to be a world or world building, all of that. But for non-fantasy books, it might just be like the environment or how much I feel immersed into the novel. Fourth part for me will be the writing, which includes any technical or stylistic aspects concerning the writing, which might also include stylistic choices like which kind of narration or what tense, really like the technical nitbits of writing. And my final point for all of my review will be my personal enjoyment, which, I mean, you can't deny that enjoyment is just a huge part of whether you're gonna like a book or not. So these are the 5 points I will use to review all of the books that I'm going to be talking about in the near future, and we'll see how that works. Let me know if you like it, or if you think I should like include any other points, or yeah, I'm just interested to hear your thoughts. So let's get back to Mistborn. I am not that much of a fantasy reader. Actually, this is probably the first proper fantasy book I've read since Game of Thrones. And other than that, I've maybe read Harry Potter, but that really is all of the fantasy I've ever read. So I was kind of nervous about this, but it was a good starting point. So in case you don't know, this book follows our main character, Vin, who is, as I said, a 16-year-old girl. She's grown up in the streets in a world where the Lord Ruler rules everything, and he's immortal and invincible, and he oppresses 99% of the population. So there's the nobility, who are rather well off, and then there's the population that is called the Ska, which is just everybody that is oppressed and is very poor and doesn't really have a good life. And this is Vin's population, really. She doesn't really have a family, so she grows up in the care of her brother, who abandons her at some point, and then she ends up in a thieving crew, so she's just on the streets day in, day out, robbing noblemen and doing all of these weird things. One day she meets a person called Kelsier, who is a very kind of famous, notorious person, who gets her to team up with him, and like Kelsier builds an entire crew and includes Vin in that crew, and together they try and overthrow the Lord Ruler, which sounds like a completely insane plan, it is absolutely insane. And as I said, the Lord Ruler is basically immortal, so there's really no way to defeat him. But anyway, they're trying, and that is like the starting point of the story. So let's get to my 5 points. First of all, we have the plot, which, like in general, a plot like this, where a group of people, especially from the oppressed layer of society, try to overthrow some oppressive tyrant ruler, isn't anything new. We've seen that before lots of times. But Brandon Sanderson does a really, really good job in that, and it's not boring at all. It is a very unique story, even though the basic plot isn't that unique, but it is the characters and the world that make it so unique, which is why I don't want to say much more about the plot, other than I've heard people say that it's slow, but I really didn't think that. It was very entertaining. I never got bored. It never dragged. So for me, the pacing and the general plot were just fine. Onto the characters then. The characters are most definitely the best thing about this book. Vin, especially the main character, the development that she undergoes in this book is insane, because she starts out as a very shy and distrustful person who won't trust anyone but herself, and she's very reserved. But then she meets Kelsier and all of these people, and she slowly starts to warm up to these people, slowly starts to become friends with people. And her development in this book really is amazing. And other than this, she's just very courageous. She's a character who will take you with her. She's very energetic, she wants to do things, and it's just nice to follow her around. So I liked her a lot. Then also Kelsier, who is the second main character, he remains a little bit of a mystery, even though he is a point of view character alongside Vin. But you are, like, generally you're more in Vin's head than you are in Kelsier's. But still, or maybe because of that, he really is very intriguing, because he has an interesting kind of backstory, and which gets revealed slowly, and you don't really know what's going on with him. But it's really very interesting and suspenseful to hear about him. And everybody else on the crew is just funny and nice and great, even though I kept messing them up in my head, like who is who, but still. So the characters in here are definitely the best part of this book. Onto the world. As I said before, I think it's the world / probably the magic system that makes this book what it is, and that makes the execution of the plot very unique. So there is a magic system which is called allomancy, and it is based on people being able to ingest and then burn certain metals and then draw powers from these metals. Like, for example, they can push and pull on things, which allows them to, like, jump up in the air much higher than you normally would, because they can push off the ground if there's some metal on the ground. They can soothe or riot people's emotions and lots of other cool things. So that's the basic magic system, and it took me a while to grasp, but once you get the hang of it, it's very, very cool, and the things you can do with it are infinite. Like, there's really no limits. There's so many things you can do with allomancy. And as I said, I had a bit of an issue in the beginning, but there is this lovely list here in the back, listing all of the metals and what they can do, which was really, really helpful. I actually bookmarked it and kept going back to it, just to not get confused. So the world building is very well done throughout the novel. The magic system gets introduced slowly but surely, and at the end of the book I really had a feeling that I do have a grasp of what it can do or can't do. Point number 4 is writing / style. To be honest, writing wise, this is probably not the most genius of books. Like, it's not your George R.R. Martin with his incredibly dense and well thought out prose. This is, on the other hand, very, very readable. The language is simple, not simplistic, but simple, but to be honest, that was just fine. Sometimes when the language is too complex, it takes you out of the story. That really didn't happen here. It just flowed nicely. It's easy to read, and you don't have to be too focused. So the writing for me, probably not a masterpiece, but well enough, and it did its job just like it had to. Maybe about the narration, it is kind of a dual perspective, but not entirely. So mostly the perspectives you get are Vin and Kelsier, and they switch between them by paragraphs, which can be a little bit confusing because it's not done by chapters, but sometimes within a chapter you would swap over from Vin to Kelsier, which takes a little getting used to, but once you do, it's just fine, and both of them are really interesting. And then towards the end of the novel, there are a few short sections by other point of view characters, and usually I don't like new POVs being introduced towards the end of a book, but in this one it was just fine because it was people that we knew what they were up to, and it wasn't confusing at all. It was just some tidbits of different perspectives mixed in, which I quite enjoyed. My final point is my enjoyment of this book. I very much enjoyed reading this book. It took me a while to really get on board with it, but I think that doesn't have anything to do with this book, but was rather due to the fact that I had just finished the last published book of Game of Thrones and was watching the series of Game of Thrones, and I was like, all I could think of was Game of Thrones, where is Arya, where's the Iron Throne, what is this? So it wasn't this book's fault at all. I was just trying to get into it and had a little bit of a hard time in the beginning, but I did get on board with it after, I don't know, maybe a third, and I really loved the characters from the get-go. It was just, there was kind of a entry barrier for me. Once I got past that, absolutely amazing, enjoyed this a lot. And the second half of the book I read in 2 or 3 days, even though it's actually quite big. It has more than 500 pages. So my enjoyment of this was huge, even though it took me a little while to get into, but it was definitely worthwhile. All right, and that have been my 5 points already. We're coming to my final thoughts. Mistborn to me was a very good starting point into some different fantasy than epic high fantasy such as Game of Thrones. I really haven't read anything like this before, but it was easy to read, easy to get into, with amazing characters, a very intriguing magic system, and really nothing, I couldn't have asked for anything more. I really, really enjoyed this, which is why I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The reason it's not a 5-star for me is I think I need to say it's because of the language, but that is only, I'm a little picky about that. It's maybe because I'm a linguist, I don't know. I like beautiful prose, which isn't exactly what this is going to deliver, but it didn't take anything away from the story. This is just my personal reason for not giving it 5 stars. Would I recommend this book? Yes, definitely. To whom? To absolutely everyone, no matter whether you only read young adult fantasy or only adult fantasy. This is for both of you, even if you don't read fantasy. I think this is a perfect place to start, and I cannot wait to read the next book in the series, which is The Well of Ascension. Alright, that was my review of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon. Bye!